what you should not do when you give charitably or when you give things away. And in the course of studying this particular proverb, I learned some new words. I like learning new words. And the word that I learned was the word sycophancy. Now, that was a new word for me, even though I've studied finances and accounting for most of my life. I didn't really come across or remember the word sycophant and sycophancy before. I hope I'm saying it right for those of you who like correct pronunciation. So, what is the text? Proverbs 22:16. It says, "He who oppresses the poor to make much for himself, or he who gives to the rich will only come to poverty." And we want to focus on the second part of this text. He who gives to the rich will only come to poverty. And when it says only come to poverty, it means eventually or in the end, all he'll get is poverty. Now, he who gives to the rich will come to poverty. So if you've seen the other video with regard to giving, I call it the mountain video. You really should watch that one first because it talks about the proper way of giving. But this particular proverb warns against giving to the rich. Why? Why would giving to the rich cause us to end up being poor? God says that if we curry favor with the rich, we end up in poverty. That's amazing. It's counterintuitive, and it's very natural for us to want to hobnob with the wealthy and to give them special attention, especially for people who are in the financial industry where their job is to help people make money. But God says, be very careful. He who gives to the rich will only end in poverty. Imagine if we invited one of the multi-billionaires to our office or to our home, and people knew that a multi-billionaire, maybe Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or Elon Musk, a multi-billionaire, that many people would want to be around that person. But the Bible says he who gives to the rich will only end in poverty. Now, I suggest that this word sycophancy that I referred to earlier, let me read the definition. Sycophancy is a behavior in which someone praises powerful or rich people in a way that is not sincere, usually in order to get some advantage from them. So when we flatter, or another new word, and for me in this case, when we give obsequious flattery, that is to say, we give people too much praise, too eagerly, just because they are rich or important. It's the opposite of being rebellious. We don't want to be rebellious, but neither do we want to be a sycophant. And Proverbs 22:16 gives us a strong warning. He who oppresses the poor to make much for himself, or he who gives to the rich, implying to make much for himself, will only come to poverty. So both of those financial strategies backfire. They backfire and they hurt the giver, they hurt the actor in a way that the actor never expected. So this is extremely important for our behavior, especially if you call yourself a Christian, because the Bible says in the book of Romans that you should associate with the lowly, the humble, not with the rich. And in the book of James, you read a very strong warning against giving preferential treatment to someone just because they are wealthy. So in terms of giving, and I suggest it's not just our money, but also our time and attention. If we give undue attention to people because they are wealthy, then the Bible says that we will impair our own future wealth. There is very little attention being paid to how to sort people who are truly deserving of our attention versus people who are not deserving of our attention. How do you sort between these two groups? Giving undue attention or undue favor or undue respect to someone just because they are rich is really much more dangerous than we think. It hurts us. It hurts the people who give them such respect. God is not a respecter of persons, and neither should we be. So, in studying techniques for financial success, In studying God's methods, he warns us in Proverbs 22:16, he who oppresses the poor to make much for himself, or he who gives to the rich, will only come to poverty. I don't want to end up poor, especially not poor in eternity, because I gave to the wrong people. So, how does that work out practically? When we give to charitable organizations, we often get tax credits. I'm suggesting that if you give for the tax credit and you give, say, to the National Ballet, just to pick on them for a second, or even say the Kiwanis Club, you may get a tax credit. But in terms of their true need, as opposed to Food for the Hungry or Compassion Canada, other charities that focus on people's primary needs, that is food, clothing, and shelter. Helping people with their food, clothing, and shelter is much more important than helping them with their ability to enjoy the fine arts. He who oppresses the poor to make much for himself, or he who gives to the rich, will only come to poverty. My point is this: if you want to avoid poverty, then make sure your charitable giving is directed to those charities that focus most directly on people's basic needs, not charities that are general causes for some environmental benefit or something that's apart from food, clothing, and shelter. Sycophancy, maybe it's a new word for you as it was for me, but the warning is there, and we would be very wise to heed God's warnings. This warning is especially needed by those in the Western world where there's a lot of wealth around. It's very easy to deliberately associate with those who are wealthy and try to serve those who are wealthy, give them preferred treatment to those who are poor.